Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. It's here, folks. It's been in development for a long time. During COVID, you remember that classic clip that went around at Tom Cruise yelling at a guy because he wasn't following COVID protocol? We're here, folks. It's been 5 years since Fallout. I think that was 2018 because that was right around the time. No, was it before 2018? Because it was right around the time of the Justice League reshoots. So was it before or after that? I think it came out after, but maybe they were filming it before that. Very strange. So it's been a few years since Cruise did that. The last movie he was a part of course, Top Gun Maverick, blew expectations out of the water for what people could expect from a Cruise joint. And Mission Impossible, there's more of them, so it's arguably the more impactful franchise to a lot of people. And he just knows what he's doing now. He's figured out his guys. He's got the guys in his corner, like McQuarrie, who's just like, I'll show up and do it. And I think what's more interesting is that when this could feel like less of a collaboration, you know, this feels more like these two are in sync with each other's personalities than like a Sean Levy and Ryan Reynolds per se, because those two clearly think the same and want to make the same movies. But when you look at McQuarrie and Cruise, I think they just like the same stuff more, so there's more collaboration in terms of what we're doing here. Dead Reckoning is an interesting film. Right off the bat, I don't think it's the highlight or the best of the franchise. I don't think it's the best movie that's been out this year doing what it's doing. In terms of like the stylization of action movies, John Wick looks more interesting. I wasn't a fan of that latest John Wick film, but what it was doing with like the camera, the cinematography, it was a little more impressive and unique than what this was. And what I got feeling this movie was it was definitely filmed a while ago. And only now are we reaching up to it, because there's specific moments in here that feel very of the COVID era or like pre-COVID era for like the story we're telling, the beats we are hitting. And that's fine. I get it. We're kind of like just reaching the end of some of those things these days, where now is like when a film would normally be filming like this year. It feels like we're out of that era. It's very interesting in that capacity, and there's definitely things in here that speak true to the issues we are having today. It's kind of ironic, not even ironic, it's just very fascinating that this movie, the main concept is Tom Cruise is going to kill an AI, and the movie opens up with like a submersible submarine imploding. Like those things being like the crux of this movie makes it very much of the era it came out in, and having it been filmed earlier makes it kind of bizarre in that capacity. But that's what this is. This is a movie, and let's get metatextual for a minute. I like doing that because I think if you look at like Top Gun Maverick as a metatextual narrative, which Tom Cruise says he doesn't do, but he clearly does, it's like, if you're doing a big Lego sequel, you have to make it matter. You can't have them change into something different. His Top Gun Maverick is like, I have to stay the same or else this doesn't work, or else you get a Dial of Destiny. That's what he's saying in Top Gun Maverick. In this movie, Dead Reckoning Part 1, what Tom Cruise is essentially saying is, don't worry, I'll protect you. We have to make movies matter again. That's what he's doing here. He's just being like, audience, I love you. It's okay. There's a surrogate audience member in this movie in the form of Haley Atwell. He's just like, it's okay. It doesn't matter what happens to me. I'm going to make sure you're okay and you get through this. I'll go beat up the AI for you. That's what he's doing. And on that note, that's kind of interesting. Like, I respect the attempt to try to say that and to experience that and believe in that. There's something there that's kind of unique. And it's just so timely that this villain happens to be like an AI, and that suddenly you look at like the powers that be of the entire universe and the world are after control of that thing to be like the top producer of this thing. And that's very interesting. More interesting than some of the other beats. First off, we should get this out of the way. Tom Cruise is the last real movie star. I think he's the last guy of this generation in this era that is actively a draw to a movie. This is a whole other conversation we don't have to get into. But he's here to stay, and he's just telling you, like, it's okay, I got this. And that's what you get from this. Sometimes the acting doesn't work. That's just a Cruise thing. He's good at portraying a certain level of confidence and charisma that makes it achievable. Is he doing better acting in Maverick? I think so, but this is more of like a physical, demanding performance where it's not about like his facial expressions or what he's attempting to say. It's more like the versatility of his body is like a prop, and like what can we put him through? What can he run along? What can he climb up? What can we jump off of? That kind of thing. And that gets you so far. When you're here to see that, it gets you that far. But when you want something else in your movie, you need more than that, because it's not a really fantastic script. I have seen worse scripts, and I've read worse scripts this year from movies that have like their scripts you could read and stuff. Of course, I haven't like read the actual like physical copy of the script, but this is a script that does a lot of explaining. And in that explanation for everything going on, it doesn't portray a lot of interesting emotional beats. It's just more like, okay, well, let's reiterate for the seventh time why we have to stop this thing from doing the thing so the audience understands, I guess is what they're going for there. It doesn't talk down to the audience, but it doesn't treat the audience like they're smart enough or capable enough to know that we're doing more than that. Does that make sense? Where we could just be like, yeah, this entity is dangerous. We're going to reiterate that danger in every scene as opposed to showing it. And there's that kind of like paranoia feel that could play into that, but it doesn't really, you know? There are certain moments where it wants to explore like, is that what it wants us to do? Is this what we're supposed to feel? But at the same time, we can pretty clearly see who the good guy and the bad guys are and the opposing forces and all that. It struck some very similar chords to a thing like Westworld and Mrs. Davis. And having just watched Mrs. Davis, I was like, wow, this feels a lot like that. Even right down to like the villain being a person that's being controlled by the AI. I'm like, that's interesting. And I didn't love that show. And seeing it here, I still don't love what it's trying to say. And that happens. You know what? It's something that just happens when you're dealing with that narrative. It is a narrative and a story beat that is very hard to talk about today, solely because of how much we hate the idea of even representing it. And maybe just a casual audience member doesn't think like that, but somebody who is in the weeds of film knows everything going on in Hollywood and those rights and those ideas at the moment. It does make it hard to want to see a story, even just including an artificial intelligence. It does help. It really helps that the entire movie, Tom Cruise is like, I'll go kill it. You know what? I'll kill this entire concept, this notion, this entity. Nobody worry. I will destroy this. I will make this movie to prove to you we don't need that. And that's kind of cool because he's jumping off of buildings, he's flying through cars. It's very exciting and it looks good. And that's the stuff that looks the best in this movie, wholeheartedly, is the action stuff. The chases look really impressive. We've seen some lackluster chases in movies recently. These are really impressive. The cinematography is fine. There's a lot of just like medium shots and wide shots, and it's been more egregious before. There's also a lot of like Dutch angles, and I know like that's like the tone that McQuarrie wants to like invoke here, but sometimes you're just like, dude, it doesn't need to be like that in this moment. And it's fine. Like that is the style and the vibe that this movie wants to go for. You also hear a lot in kind of like the more recent trades, while we were still able to do like interviews and stuff, that McQuarrie and Cruise are both taking inspiration from like Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd and stuff. I see that. Thinking about that actively now, you do see that. Where it's like, we're going to climb a certain way on top of this train, we're going to move a certain way on this train, like the way like certain action beats happen, the way certain things are framed. It's very evocative of that. And that's kind of like a cool thing to see. Because you know what? I guess that is kind of like the evolution of that style of filmmaking where, you know, back in the day, Keaton is just, I'll climb on like the front of this train and I might die. That's essentially what Cruise is doing, is like, I'm going to jump off of a cliff, parachute my way into a moving train. And that's essentially the escalation. 100 years apart. That's kind of impressive, you gotta say. Cruise does a good job of what he's asked to do. Ethan Hunt is less of like a tough, kind of like interesting character than like a Maverick is, which is fine. He doesn't need to be. The entire movie is just him being like, I will risk my life for all of you because you're my friends and I love you and no one has to fight this battle but me. I appreciate that stuff. It's kind of fun. All the classics are back. Ving Rhames getting to sit down and stand up in every scene. He's like, don't worry, Ethan, we'll get to do this. Good for you, man. Make that money. Get that paycheck. It's fantastic. Simon Pegg being the funny guy again. Does it really well. And the other thing too that's just very fascinating, and we could do like an entire kind of like concept talking about that, is how Cruise and McQuarrie like pick people who have played in the superhero field before and turn them into action stars in different capacity. They did it last one with Cavill, arguably one of his best roles, and they do it here with Hayley Atwell. Hayley Atwell is essentially like our POV character, our ride-along character. It's very fascinating to say that because she is a name I do think a lot of people are familiar with. But aside from the work in like Captain America adjacent properties, is she a household name? She's known in like this circle, but is there like a larger circle where she's known for? And when you start to think about that, you start to be like, well, she is a beautiful woman and she's very talented and she hasn't had the opportunity to do this before. You see what she's asked to do. She's kind of silly and funny. She's very inept and capable. And you're like, why aren't we having like a million rom-coms or action movies with her as a lead? Because she holds her own well, being like the person who knows what she's doing, but is also like afraid of stuff, and she does the comedic timing really well. You're like, that's really good. What a good get for this franchise, because she definitely fits into this vibe. And she plays it well. And then you have Rebecca Ferguson come back. You're like, yeah, another person that fits into this vibe. And you have to start to wonder, like, does Cruise just know how to like pick women for this property? Like, he gets his old buddies to come in, like Peg and Rames, and they're just like here doing their fun thing. But then you just get like Vanessa Kirby shows up, Palm Clementif shows up, and you're like, these are talented women who know how to act and are given the chance to act, and they have fun in here, and it looks like they're good at what they're doing. And you're like, wow, that kind of works. The one thing I find very fascinating too is that, like, we all know Tom Cruise is 61. I think there's one male character that's like a main character with like big lines of dialogue who looks like he's under the age of 40. I think every other male character intentionally looks like they're the same age or older than Cruise. Like, it's very bizarre. He clearly had a lot of work done, and I get it, Cruise. Like, you want to look young, that's fine, but the directors of the agencies, the villains, the CIA guys coming after him, even Peg and Rames, they're like, oh, look, his age or older. I'm not saying Cruise looks young here. He certainly doesn't. But we have like one actor who's like actively like 32. That's a male. And the age for the women just kind of like falls under 50. It's fine. He does have older actresses doing some very interesting work here. And that's kind of impressive to see. It's very interesting. Like, it's a good story. It keeps you captivated. Some of the dialogue's a little too on the nose and it doesn't feel right. Some of the jokes, while are in tone with other Mission Impossibles, they don't come across as naturalistic. But the slapstick nature of the entire piece, where it's just people handcuffed together, running through doors and running through cars and everything, train sequences and going on motorcycles, there is just like this inspiration of like classic Hollywood that's kind of impressive to see. It's kind of like a necessary evil that we have to talk about AI as like an evil force in movies. And I'd rather somebody like Tom Cruise or Christopher McQuarrie handle it than a lesser talent, because they'll at least understand like this is a problem and not something we should work around. There is an actual ending to the story, and the choreography is fantastic. It's just the parts of it that don't work are very noticeable and kind of stand out from it. But you're going to walk away having a good time at the movies. Whether you think this movie's perfect or not, there is something about it that does harken back to a thing we don't do a lot in cinema, and that is make something interesting, you know? Like, there's like a serious attempt being made for this type of movie, and I appreciate that. I'm very excited for part 2, whatever that's going to look like. I'm always excited for the next thing Cruise is working on. There are rumors that maybe McQuarrie wants to make a DC Comics movie, and if he wants to bring Cruise over, hey, that could be exciting too, but who's to say? Like, I'm impressed with what we got here. I'm not going to say it's the best of the franchise or it's the best movie of the year. I don't think it's my favorite movie of the year, but I think just in like straight up action, we haven't got better. And that's kind of cool. So, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, I am going to give a 7 out of 10. Now, thank you all for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.